we'll announce that item number 7 will be continued for 2 weeks. And if there's no objection from the committee members, we could take items 9 and 10 on consent. Okay. So with that, the action of the committee is to take items 9 and 10 on consent. There are no public comment cards on 9 and 10. Nobody here to speak on 9 and 10. Thank you very much. Okay. And now we'll move back to item number 8, and then we'll go to item number 11 after that. Item number 8.
And item number 8 is a motion, Perry Park Design, relative to instructing the CLA to convene a working group consisting of the Mayor's Office, the Department of General Services, the Bureau of Engineering, the LA Federal Court, and the Federal General Services Administration to explore the feasibility of a property exchange between the city and federal government.
Any questions, Ms. Perry?
No, I'd like to convene the group.
Okay. All right. So with that, is there anybody here to speak on item number 8 from the public?
Yes, Councilwoman Committee, Mandana Khatibchi from the CLA's office. I just wanted to mention that the CLA did convene the parties named in the motion for a brief preliminary meeting, and we talked about next steps and action items, and we are going to have a follow-up meeting sometime next month.
Okay. All right. Is there anybody here from the general public to speak on item number 8? Public comment is open on item number 8. See no one come forward. Item number 8, public comment is closed. So with that, it's the action of the committee to adopt the motion and direct the CLA to report back as necessary. And we anticipate in the next 30 days to 5 weeks?
Yes, next 30 days.
Okay. Thank you very much. So with that, we now go to item number 11.
And item number 11 is a motion, Perry Cardenas, relative to initiating the surplus property process and evaluating the feasibility of a direct sale of city-owned property located at 225 East 5th Street.
Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Kaplan with the City Attorney's Office. My understanding was that you had some questions with regard to the Daniel Taylor eviction.
No, I'm fine, other than I'm reporting to my notes. The tenant's been ordered to appear in court to respond to the eviction notice, and he failed to appear. Is that correct?
Well, what happened was we didn't answer at first, and then he finally answered, and then the matter was supposed to go to court, but unfortunately the notice that the court sent of the trial never got to us. I still don't know what happened to it. So the case was dismissed. We're filing a motion to have the case reinstated. I'm finishing up the motion right now. We're expecting to have it, filed.
Is he still living in the property?
Yes, he's still living.
Okay, he's not paying rent or anything like that?
Well, he was never paying rent.
Yeah, he was there.
As a caretaker.
Yeah, okay, so he's still there, and you're going to refile the case?
Well, actually, we're going to file a motion for the city to be relieved from dismissal because we never received notice of the trial, and then that will reinstate the case, and then it should go to trial within a couple weeks thereafter because eminent domain goes.
Did we confirm who the court sent it to?
We have no idea where
But whoever sent it to
where the
us,
notice went.
It's a formal notice. They had to have some record that as to where they sent it.
Well, all we received was the notice after the fact. I have not seen. It's weird. It's very strange. I mean, the notice that we received after the fact was actually, it didn't have my name on it. It was sent to the city attorney without mentioning me. It's possible maybe that somehow it went to the front office and got lost. I don't know.
Well, that's not the issue in the motion anyway. I mean, obviously, this is going to proceed with respect to the gentleman who is residing there. The motion talked about declaring the property surplus, asking GSD to initiate the process and to do a Class A appraisal and have the CAO prepare a report on the feasibility of a direct sale, and the GSD, with the assistance of the CAO and the city attorney, to report back on what the feasibility is of a direct sale.
When can we?
Unfortunately, that's not.
Yeah, that's not for you.
GSD.
Yeah.
When can we expect to have that report back on those items?
The feasibility of direct sale is done by the CAO's office, and so they would be the ones reporting on that. We've begun the surplus process.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Is the CAO here?
Anybody from the CAO's office here on this item?
Not from the CAO's office, but Marcia Gonzalez Kimbrough with the City Attorney's Office.
But what about the CAO's office? Because they're the ones who are going to have to do the report.
Well, Councilmember, our office would receive the report that the General Service would prepare to declare surplus. We work with the City Attorney's Office in doing the finding for direct sale.
Let me just say this. This is a case that has been pending since I was a staff person.
Wow, that long?
That long, yeah. It's really, and I feel like, I don't know, who's driving this train or why, but it's always been this sort of circular mess of who's on first. So why don't we try it like this? Can we get GSD to initiate the surplus property process and to do the Class A appraisal? Can you do that first? Without anybody else having to ask you to do it? And then I need to communicate to the CAO to do the feasibility analysis. So I don't know if I have to do yet another motion to get that done, or how can we get the CAO to do the feasibility analysis? Is he?
Jay?
I think he's conferring with his colleague.
They're going to reinstitute the case.
We welcome whoever from the CAO's office wants to clarify this for us. That'd be great.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay.
State your name for the record.
Bernice Collins, Office of the CAO, and I'm sorry, your specific question was whether or not the CAO would report back on the matter?
On the feasibility, do a feasibility analysis pursuant to my motion of a direct sale. We just need a report.
It would not be a problem to prepare a report
Okay.
on it.
All right, well, maybe we can hold this in committee or something.
Sure. And by when could we get the GSD's report and the CAO's report? 30 days, 45 days? What?
I have to check on the Class A, when that can be done. It's usually
Normally, how long does it take?
6 to 8 weeks.
Okay,
But we're
so
not
within,
busy right now, right?
so within 60 days?
Let's do 60
60
days.
days to the GSD and the CAO?
I wouldn't be the analyst preparing it.
Okay, at this time, we'll give both the CAO and the
Yeah,
GSD
it's not going to take
60 days to get back to us, and just apprise this committee if for some reason you need more time than that.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then as far as the case pending, by that time, you should be able to come back and tell us whether or not the case has been reinstituted.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And make sure the courts know whose name to put on the notice.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to remind the committee that we had discussions the last time that this was before the committee. I'm the attorney that advises the Proposition K program. And this specific site, Engine Company Number 23, is specified in the ballot measure to be converted to a junior arts center. That restricts its use and its sale. And so we had discussions in the past about whether it would be advisable to go through with the feasibility and the expense of a appraisal.
I'd like to get an analysis to see if it's even feasible, so I have all that information before me, and I'm fully aware of what you're saying, because I've been here probably as long as you have, and, I remember each and every step of this, and for whatever reason, and I still don't understand it, I know because Mr. Echevarria worked on this before you did, and I was here before Prop K even got instituted, so I'm completely aware of that. So I'd like to get all of the facts in front of us so that we can make some informed choices and look at some analysis on a deeper level. I understand the Prop K concerns, and I appreciate the fact that you've put them on the record more than once. I do appreciate that. But I really would like to get some information so that we can make some realistic decisions about this. And particularly if the case does get reinstituted, I think we need to be able to be in a position to move forward in some form or fashion.
Okay.
So
All right.
bring this back in
Okay.
60 days?
Yep, 60 days.
Thank you.
Okay, that's the action of the committee. All right. Anybody else on item number 11? I didn't see any public comment cards on item 11. Seeing none? Okay. We move now to item number 1.
Okay, and item number 1 is a discussion item with representatives of the CLA and the Office of the Mayor, their intergovernmental relations, relative to an update on the state legislative program.
John Wickham with the CLA, and Don Estacio with the Mayor's Office. I'll just go down a quick list of bills here. These are items that have sponsorship from the City of Los Angeles that this committee had considered back in January and sent forward, and we've had some good success, I think. The first bill is AB 1641 concerning redevelopment of blighted areas.
This bill is actually on the Senate floor, and it's about to have its third reading.
Who's the author?
Isidore Hall?
Yes. The next, Donna calls my favorite bill, AB 1919. Mike Davis, this is the Survey Monument Bill.
And this bill passed last week out of Senate Local Government Committee. It's now headed to the floor. It is a non-fiscal bill, so it won't go to appropriations. This would generate a little bit of revenue for the City of Los Angeles, help the Bureau of Engineering and the work that they do. So this is a positive for the city. AB 2347 concerns mortgage defaults and secondary public financing. This is a Mike Fuhr bill. And this also passed out of committee last week. It passed out of Senate Judiciary Committee. It's non-fiscal, so it will be heading straight to the Senate floor. And then AB 2531, Felipe Fuentes. This is economic development and redevelopment. This was, again, something that the redevelopment agency recommended to the council, and the committee passed. This bill also passed out of Senate Local Government last week. It is non-fiscal. It will be heading to the Senate floor. AB 2689, introduced by Cameron Smythe, concerns rabies vaccinations. This is another one. This actually would have a significant revenue impact, positive for the City of Los Angeles. This bill passed both houses and is now on the governor's desk, awaiting, hopefully, approval.
And that bill is more of a cleanup bill? It's cleaning up old legislation that's been on the books for a while?
Yes, the way that rabies vaccinations verification is handled right now, it creates a whole lot of paperwork in animal services, so they're not able to actually process the paperwork and line things up efficiently or effectively. With this new legislation, they'll be able to be much more efficient in licensing dogs and making sure that the rabies vaccination is set up in a way. So this should result in a lot more licenses on dogs.
Good.
The next is AB 2756, mobile billboard advertising displays. This was actually an idea brought forward in sponsorship by Mr. Zine.
This bill passed the Senate.
Is it dead?
No,
I'm just kidding.
it is not. It passed out of a committee last week. It is non-fiscal. It will be on the Senate floor next.
So it's an AB bill?
Yes.
So basically, it's at the latter part of its process, hopefully.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Any news on any dialogue with the governor's office as to how they feel about the bill?
We have not checked yet. We will check after it gets out of the Senate.
There's no fiscal impact on that.
No, it's a
This
non.
gives us the authority to clean our communities.
I want to call Arnold, make sure he signs it.
Please.
Okay, thank you.
SB 1192 concerns airport rental car facility fees. This is a Jenny Oropesa bill.
This bill passed out of committee last week and is being re-referred to Assembly Appropriations, which is chaired by Assemblymember Fuentes.
Re-referred?
Mm-hmm.
It's a kiss of death.
How do you know?
Re-referral usually is not a good sign. What seemed to be the dialogue in the last committee on that bill?
The amendments, I think, changed the dollar amount on the bill, or there's disagreement on how much.
Okay, that's why. Okay, that's why. Okay, they're going to finalize, hopefully, that negotiation. All right.
Yeah, that's again, positive revenue for the airports. A couple bills that the city does not currently have positions on that you should be advised of. SB 974, Darrell Steinberg, this is the bill concerning enterprise zones, I believe it is, that would have had some negative impacts on our enterprise zone program. That bill was pulled, but there is an opportunity for that to come back later in the session. And there's a position pending in committee that was just recently introduced, and as soon as that comes forward, the legislature's on a break until August 2nd, so we have some
that bill
time.
when it got pulled?
It was in the Assembly JED&E Committee.
Jobs, Economic Development, and the Economy.
Thank you. So the author wanted to make some amendments to that bill. There was substantial opposition from the League of California Cities and a number of other organizations. So hopefully the amendments that come forward will be going in the right direction on that. So continue watching that.
Last week, the council adopted an emergency position on AB 1955 by Assemblymember De La Torre, and this was about public officers holding quote-unquote incompatible offices, and you took an emergency position to oppose. The bill did fail passage in committee last week.
The bill what?
It failed passage.
For example, it would affect,
an
council members' ability to be on the MTA board?
Exactly.
Yes.
Things of that nature.
The Golden Line Authority, the Expo Line Authority, some of the JPAs, such as the San Fernando Valley COG. I mean, there was concern that it was really substantial impact on the member of elected officials to serve on regional coordinating committees.
Now, who was the author again?
De La Torre.
De La Torre.
Mm-hmm.
And what seemed to be the reasoning for that bill?
I think he was aiming to prevent conflict of interest. It was very broad, though, so there was a ton of opposition, like John just said, from pretty much everyone.
We had actually, and a number of people had actually queried the author's office on that very question, and there was no satisfactory answer that came forward.
So one could assume that the author thought it would be a conflict of interest for somebody who gets elected to the Los Angeles City Council to actually be on the MTA board, where it's a regional authority that actually includes all of the transportation responsibilities within that region, where the city of Los Angeles is wholly within.
Yes.
And somebody could assume, since the office didn't clarify, that perhaps they might think that that's a conflict?
That seemed to be the direction it was going in. There was a very specific example of an elected official who then subsequently ran for a water district seat and won that water district seat. And as a result of that, the county district attorney's office got involved, and that elected official lost his council district seat as a result of existing law.
Because he
was holding two
elected offices at the same time.
Exactly.
But
unfortunately,
for example, you're appointed to the MTA board. You're not elected to the MTA board. So that's trying to solve a problem by affecting something that is categorically completely different.
Exactly. So this bill was extending into areas that had no relation to that case, although that case was being cited as the example for the need for the bill.
Nobody amended it? They didn't amend it to just focus on basically saying you can't hold two offices, elected offices?
Well, that's what the law already said.
Yeah.
So it was,
to clarify, it sounds just like a clarifying piece of legislation.
Yeah. It sounded that way. Unfortunately, the edits that kept coming back never actually got far enough to make it crystal clear that this was too overreaching. So.
Oh, it's dead.
Yeah, it's dead, so we're in good
Nothing's ever
shape.
completely dead.
Well, right now.
Legislature of California.
One other bill that you should know about, because there's been a lot of discussion about it, was SB 625. There were concerns that this bill was going to be revised to address transient occupancy tax and how that can be charged to the online service providers. SB 625 died in committee. So
who's the author?
That was Rod Wright.
Right.
So that vehicle is no longer available. We'll continue watching other legislation to see if the idea resurfaces.
So it got killed twice already?
Yes.
Okay, so it's dead. For real. Right.
So, yes. And there's no real update on the state budget. They don't have one. The Democrats in the Assembly and the Senate have come together on some guiding principles, and they are supposed to be meeting this week with the governor in the Big Five forum. We'll see if those proceed. Currently, there are no local revenues that are identified as on the table at the moment, so no news is good news, and let's keep our head low.
There's nothing left for them to take.
Yeah.
When you really look at it.
Do they have a deadline in the legislative process to get it over to the governor?
Was that June 15th?
June 15th.
June 15th, and the fiscal year at
July
the state
1st.
level starts July 1st.
Yes.
Well, they're on borrowed time now. The Fran Pavley bill on motorcycle mufflers,
Yes, that did pass from committee. I need to verify whether that is and I think it's an appropriations bill, so,
there's already legislation in the vehicle code regarding sound, excessive sound's already in the vehicle code as a violation.
yes.
So we couldn't really understand what she was pursuing, and to make it from the 80s, had to be original exhaust, which are not available to people, which would take a whole bunch of motorcycles off the highway, which doesn't really help people when they need to commute. The other one was Orpeza with the photo red light, and having the local authorities able to establish local revenue instead of the state taking a majority of the fine.
Yes, I think you're talking about SB 949. That passed out of committee. It's actually in assembly, third reading. She did exempt parking citations in her bill.
They're already exempt.
So the league has actually relaxed its position quite a bit on that bill.
The League of California Cities?
Yes.
Because the problem we have with that is the local jurisdiction pays for everything. We're losing $300,000 a year on our photo red light system. And the state, out of a $500 ticket, the state takes a majority, we get $157. So we're $300,000 in the hole, states take majority of the money, and we're paying, and then there's thousands of people who haven't even paid the tickets. So there's a complicated process that isn't really working. Okay, because I know she pulled that for a while.
She did.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, what about these other, the bond measures? City's position, if any, on the upcoming November ballot initiatives, like the bonds, the marijuana, et cetera. We've taken positions on any of those?
We have a position on one of them, and that's the league's measure. It's a position of support.
Sorry, say it again?
The league's measure to protect the local revenues, prevent the
22.
state, Prop 22, to prevent the state from taking those revenues. City of Los
Taking
Angeles.
any more revenue?
Yeah, any more,
They've
yeah.
already taken a whole bunch of it.
Yes. So we have a support position for that measure, Proposition 22. We do not have positions on any of the others. There is a measure, an opinion, or a position pending in your committee concerning the state park item. Your committee did not endorse that, and I need to check on the status. I think we got hung up in the processing of that one to find out where that item is. But that would have charged a fee on the DMV.
$18 additional.
Yes, and your committee did not support that measure. So that's the only other item that the council is before the council for consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody here from the general public to speak on item number 1? Seeing no one come forward, no public comment cards on item number 1. Public comment on item number 1 is now closed. Thank you for your report. Item number 2.
Item number 2 is a CLA report and a resolution relative to the city's position to oppose SB 194, Flores, which would enact the Community Equity Investment Act of 2009.
John Wickham with the CLA's office. We'd ask that you continue this item for 2 weeks until your next committee meeting. The subject matter of this bill has been changed substantially, and we're doing an analysis of the new language. The new language is opposed by the League of California Cities because it would insert the state of California into the CDBG funding process for entitlement cities. Right now, entitlement cities have no state involvement whatsoever, so we're concerned. We want to take a look at that language and give you a recommendation that makes sense.
Okay, we'll continue item number 2 for 2 weeks. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We now go to item number 3.
And item number 3 is also a CLA report and a resolution, Smith-Zine, relative to the city's position to support SB 1024, Oropesa, which would provide for increased fines and impoundment procedures for illegally operated and/or unlicensed tow trucks.
Good afternoon, Annie Zanino from the CLA's office. On May 11, 2010, a resolution was introduced in support of SB 1024, also known as the Bandit Tow Truck Bill. SB 1024 focuses on curbing the activities of bandit tow truck operators, a faction of operators within the towing industry who engage in predatory towing practices. The provisions of SB 1024 would provide that an illegally operated or unlicensed tow truck be impounded for up to 30 days and makes the illegal or unlicensed operation of a tow truck a misdemeanor punishable by up to $2,500 fine. The Official Police Garage Association of Los Angeles, or OPGLA, reports that this legislation would improve law enforcement's ability to regulate bandit towing companies that are unsafe, violate consumer and federal laws, and divert business from legitimate towing companies. And if you have any specific subject matter questions on the bill, we have LAPD and the OPGLA here. And John Wickham's going to provide a status of the bill.
The bill itself, this bill died in committee last week. However, the author and Ms. Denny spoke to the author's office and to some of the others working on this bill, and there is some indication that they'll try and bring it back before the end of the session. If you would still like to take a position on this bill, then the committee would need to revise the resolution in front of you. The resolution is very specific to support this bill, and we would suggest that you revise that language to support this bill or any legislation similar on the same subject matter.
Who was opposing it?
I don't think that there was anyone opposing it. There was some discussion between the two towing associations, the OPGLA and the CTTA, on some of the language on the bill. And so I think that they just haven't reached consensus, and I think that they're concerned that it may, there may not be enough time within this legislative session for it to go forward. But there's a possibility, of course, of it piggybacking onto another item of legislation or and we have someone here from the OPGLA who can give a little more specifics, but that's essentially the reason that it may not pass.
A question?
No, she answered.
Okay. All right, thank you. Does anybody else want to make comment on this? Sure. Come on up, state your name for the record.
Hi, Eric Rose, Executive Director of the Official Police Garage Association. The bill was shelved temporarily because the Assembly member asked that we have support from the California Tow Truck Drivers Association before they move forward. We believe we'll have that very soon. We met with them last week. They were tentatively opposed to the bill because they actually wanted a more comprehensive piece of legislation, much broader than this very specific piece of legislation deals with. They wanted to do things that would also impact the insurance industry, would also impact repossessors. We were opposed to that approach because the more people who were involved in the process, as you know, the more likelihood that the bill would be opposed and would die. So we wanted to do a very narrow, very specific piece of legislation to deal with a very specific problem in L.A. I think LAPD has the statistics that they can discuss, but there are a number of tow companies that are operating illegally, and the teeth are just not there in the legislation. We have companies that continually violate the law, and they are cited by LAPD, but it's just it's the cost of doing business. We have modeled this legislation off of the very successful legislation that was passed 2 years ago to deal with bandit taxis. And our view is that if you can take away the mechanism by which they're committing the crime, you have a more likelihood of success.
Okay. Well, you don't have as many bandit tow trucks as you have bandit taxi cabs, so it should be easier to control once they have some tools to give the police the ability.
I let LAPD speak that, but I agree with you, Councilman.
About LAPD, Mr. Rose?
I do.
How much?
Enough, but I'll let the subject matter experts at LAPD and Commission Investigation speak for the department.
Are you a reserve with the LAPD?
Yes, sir.
You have some great knowledge.
Maybe the department could put a task force of reserve officers to tackle this problem.
Great idea. I'll volunteer for that.
I think actually CID does a fantastic job, but I think what we're looking for is the teeth in the law here.
Sure, absolutely.
And we would
Need a
ask
better tool to hopefully not just curtail it, but actually let them know that we're being serious and we can actually stop them.
Correct. And we would support the CLA's recommendation that the committee adopt a language that allows the city to go on record when this legislation is introduced. It looks like we're going to probably either be looking at amending an existing bill that's in the Senate right now or working on something next year, but we're looking for support and concept.
Okay. Good. All right. Thank you for that suggestion. And when is the last day of the legislative session this year?
August 31st.
Wow, it's early this time.
Yeah.
They're on break now, then when they come back?
They're on break until August 2nd, so they have 29 days to work through a big
So will
stack
they
of
be
bills.
dealing with budget during that time, or will they,
Yeah.
Probably will be meeting on budget.
They'll probably be dealing with the budget through August.
will they have time to do something else?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
They can multitask. Can't get a budget done on time, but they can multitask.
They may not have as many bills this year as they've had in previous sessions, but they will work through them.
And, okay, so with that, the CLA recommended that we support SB 1024, and also not just of the specific language, but as long as the language continues the similar concept of which it was introduced.
Yes.
Okay.
So we will, if at your instruction, draft a revised resolution for consideration when this item moves forward to council.
All right. So we have a motion before us?
Yes.
Okay. All right. It's unanimous. Okay, draw it up.
Thank you very much.
Now we move to item number 4.
And item number 4 is a report from the Los Angeles Department of Transportation relative to a land purchase for a new bus maintenance facility in downtown Los Angeles.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Jim Lefton with the Department of Transportation. Just some quick background for you. Back in 2006, the City Council authorized the General Services Department to purchase the first of 3 adjacent properties on behalf of LADOT in downtown Los Angeles for a planned bus maintenance facility. The department currently is recommending that GSD be authorized to purchase the second of the 3 properties, which is located at 454 Commercial Street, 459 Ducommon Street, from the owner, Mr. Him Kwan, for $2.86 million. The Federal Transit Administration will cover 80% of the cost of this land purchase. The department is also recommending that GSD be authorized to begin condemnation proceedings for the third property, which is located at 503 East Ducommon Street. The owner of the property, PBR Realty, has refused to negotiate with GSD. The appraised cost of this third parcel is $1.32 million, and again, 80% of the cost of the purchase for the land will come from FTA grant funding. The department believes that this new planned bus maintenance facility in downtown Los Angeles would not only provide a higher level of service quality, but would also result in about $400,000 to $600,000 per year in contractor operating and lease cost savings. We estimate that the full budget for the land purchase and construction of the facility would be about $16.6 million, the city's local share of about $3.3 million, and we estimate that that cost would be returned to the city in about 5 to 8 years based on the cost savings that I previously mentioned to you. The required environmental work has already been completed for all 3 properties. The council adopted the findings of the CEQA initial study, which found that there's no evidence that the project will have any substantial negative impact on the environment. And as I mentioned to you before, this project would be 100% special funded using federal grant funding and Proposition A local return funds for the local match, so there'd be no impact on the general fund. Do you have any questions?
Question?
Okay, GSD, the city attorney, the appraised value identified $1.32 million. How much above that amount do you anticipate the city may have to pay for it?
You're talking about the third property?
One owned by PBR Realty?
The Realty company.
Right. I don't know if Dave Roberts, do you have anything better answer that question?
Dave Roberts, Asset Management. We have determined that the cost for that parcel may be $2 million.
$2 million?
Yes. And the owner has been inflexible in any negotiations with us at this point.
And how long do condemnation proceedings take? And is there a time limit for expenditure of FTA grant funds? So how long, if it goes to condemnation, and then is there a time limit for the expenditure of the FTA grant funds, or does it expire?
We should be okay in terms of FTA, in terms of the time.
About the time
It'll take about 1 year to 18 months once we begin the condemnation process. We've already done our work, so it's just a matter of us turning over the file to the city attorney. We've worked with them in the past on this one, so they're quite familiar with it.
And it's just a matter of money that the PBR Realty refused to negotiate.
That's it.
They want $2 million out, 1.32.
$2 million and not a penny less.
And it's appraised at what?
1.3.
So he wants more than that. So we condemn it, then what does he get?
We'll have another appraisal done by ourselves, and he'll get his own appraiser, and they'll probably split the difference between the two appraisals.
So maybe he'll get 1.30. He may lose.
But the thing is, the condemnation proceedings basically are in two major parts, right? We as government can go ahead and petition, let the courts know that we want to take the property. We have our appraisal. We hopefully have an accurate appraisal. And then what happens is we can actually take the property. And then subsequent to that, it takes a bit longer for the courts to determine at a later date whether or not they were given fair market value for their property. If they weren't, then the court requires us to pay the difference.
That's correct.
If they were given fair market value, then the court says to the former owner, we went through the process, you got fair market value for your property, you can go home now, we're done. I'm not getting you any more money from in this case, from the city of LA, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So the first part of it will take from a year to 18 months?
I think so, based upon previous experiences we had with the city attorney.
Okay. And the second part could take longer, which we just got to cross our fingers and hope that we had an accurate appraisal, and an appraisal that will be recognized by the courts as an accurate figure, then we're fine.
That's right.
Okay. And if not, then we got to figure out where we get the difference, right? Anything else?
Oh, that's good.
Okay. So with that, this committee will direct GSD Asset Management to proceed with the acquisition of the commercial street / Ducommun Street, Ducommun Street property. And it's at 2.86 million?
Yes.
Okay. And also direct GSD to work with the city attorney's office to begin the condemnation proceedings for the property.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, that's the action of the committee. Thank you. Now we go to item number 5.
And item number 5 is a motion, Cardenas-Gregorian, relative to directing the LADOT to report on options to allow the city's surface lots in the Van Nuys Civic Center to remain open until 2 a.m. for public use to support the surrounding commercial and retail businesses.
Anybody here? You the last one standing or what? Anybody here on this item? Again, this motion is relative to the small handful of city parking lots that we have in the Van Nuys Civic Center area to extend the hours of operation. Is there anybody here from staff that has any objections or warnings or?
I had a question on it. Is there a charge or is it free?
No, we're not asking that they leave it open for free. They do manage those properties, so we just need to find out whether or not it's an action that they can actually sustain and if it makes sense.
So what will the fee be if it's open until 2 a.m. since we don't have
That's what we want to know.
staffing until 2 a.m.?
What it's going to take to actually manage it and make it worthwhile to keep them open.
You here for that?
No.
All right.
Senator General Services. So who's going to manage it?
No.
Well, most of the parking lots are managed by the city, not all of them. There's a small handful of them. Some are managed by a third party. But the bottom line is, basically, we need to report back to figure out whether or not
Who's going to manage it and how much is it going to cost?
every lot's different. But I get what you're saying. Some of them are managed directly from the city department, city employees. Some of them are actually third parties, but they're owned by us. So that's the reason why we're going to instruct for a report back.
I don't know of any city lot that's managed till 2 in the morning, unless it's Pershing Square. So what businesses are open in that area till 2 o'clock in the morning?
Well, that's the problem. Once we get these lots open, maybe they will start.
Like what?
To stay open. Well, we got restaurants and stuff.
Till 2 a.m.?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm familiar with that area, Mr.
But just because you're a police officer doesn't mean you know every single little
I used to work there. I just don't know what you're going to have open till 2 a.m.
Well, that's the thing. We've got to figure out what's feasible.
So we need to report back.
Mm-hmm. All right. Anybody here from the general public to comment on item number 5?
Only
Any
three
business
left.
owners in Van Nuys want to tell this man that you'd like to stay open
No, I
until
said
2?
three left. You're one of the three. We don't count Reggie.
All right. Okay, so this committee will go ahead and direct the CAO to report back to the committee relative to the current costs of maintenance and security for these locations, and also work with GSD and whatever departments are necessary, DOT, et cetera, to find out what it is the current expenditures are and what kind of cost incremental it would be to extend the hours. Okay. So that's the action of the committee. Now we move to item number 6, which is the last scheduled item for the agenda, right?
Correct. And item number 6 is a report from the City Ethics Commission, a report from the City Attorney, and a draft ordinance in response to motion Carnes, Garcetti, Rosendahl, Smith, relative to the effects of the Supreme Court ruling in Citizens United versus Federal Elections Commission in relation to city campaign finance laws and steps needed to comply with federal law.
Can you please bring us up to speed as to what that case clarified or not, as to what contributions can be made and by whom?
Good afternoon, council members. Deputy City Attorney Renee Stottle. The Supreme Court ruled in the Citizens United versus FEC case. It was a case regarding independent spending by an organization called Citizens United. At issue in the Supreme Court case were federal provisions which prohibited corporations and unions from directly spending as opposed to out of a political action committee. The Supreme Court struck down that requirement, concluding that such restrictions on independent spending were in contravention of the First Amendment, and further advised or further stated that even if it were constitutional, choosing between different speakers was an unconstitutional method of fixing the problem. In reaching that conclusion, the Supreme Court struck down prior Supreme Court case law in part from 2003 and 1990. In concluding that it was the federal restrictions were a violation of the First Amendment, the Supreme Court relied on the 1976 Supreme Court opinion in Buckley versus Vallejo, and finding that there has to be a finding of corruption or appearance of corruption in relation to independent spending, and concluded essentially as a matter of law that because independent groups operate independently of a candidate, that there can't, at least at this point in time, there can be no finding of such corruption. So the Supreme Court also upheld restrictions on, or disclosure and disclaimer requirements.
They upheld the disclosure, but not the expenditure.
Right, restrictions on independent spending. So, two things. One, we have essentially the very same provision in our city law, and that's the ordinance that's in front of you today. 49.7.26.2, we had added that to our city's campaign finance law a few years ago. And our recommendation is that it be repealed because it is unconstitutional at this point in time based on the Supreme Court's decision, and we should repeal it to avoid any confusion from those seeking to comply with city laws. That it's in effect the Ethics Commission has adopted a resolution that it's not enforcing the provision, but we also have the potential of liability should someone file a lawsuit.
So it's one thing to not enforce, but it would probably be more in line with today's reality to just strike that from our code.
That's right, and the Rules Committee also heard this at the end of May and has made that recommendation. Where we are after this decision, I think we're still figuring out where we are after this decision in terms of other campaign finance laws. As you know, in council a couple of weeks ago, we had the council, per our request and recommendation, also
repealed another provision in city law that related to contribution limits to independent committees, and that was based on a subsequent decision of the Ninth Circuit that ruled such limits unconstitutional. There are other cases that are pending out there that seek to challenge other provisions of law, and so the jurisprudence in campaign finance area right now is changing.
Now, when it comes to your job over at City Ethics, making sure that all of these are complied with, and if they're not being complied with, you're one of the entities that actually would require somebody to either come into compliance or challenge whether or not they are in compliance, correct?
That's correct.
And who else would have jurisdiction over candidates and or elections within the City of LA? It's City Ethics of Los Angeles. Is it the DA? Is it FPPC? Who?
Leanne Pelham with the Ethics Commission. Yeah, it depends on which law is at issue. Any law that is in our city charter that deals with campaign financing, any law in our in our campaign finance ordinance would be provisions that the Ethics Commission can investigate and enforce. The Commission also has authority to investigate matters that might be under the FPPC's rules, but ultimately the FPPC would have the ability and the authority to investigate and fine under state laws. The issues that the city attorney, Renee Stottle's been speaking of are issues that are squarely within the Ethics Commission's authority. And after the Supreme Court decision came down in late January, to help with the compliance side of things, we did send out a special bulletin to a very wide audience so that people know that it was on our radar and that it was something that we understood was no longer enforceable. And it's the first opportunity the Ethics Commission held a meeting in February and considered the issue and issued the resolution that Renee spoke of. Since then, we also did ask for advice from the city attorney's office to clarify, whether there was anything further that we should do, and their advice was that we should, in fact, also repeal this. This is cleanest for people who need to look at our laws and understand what applies to them. So we submitted a transmittal joining in that request to the council.
So City Ethics of Los Angeles actually concurs with the recommendation from the city attorney's office?
Yes.
That it's not just about not enforcing it, but actually taking it off of the books?
Yes, we do.
Enough questions?
Okay. So one of the matters that was clarified by the U.S. Supreme Court was being able to or not being able to put monetary limits on independent expenditures? Or was it from whom those contributions can come from?
The Supreme Court decision specifically was dealing with what they considered to be limits on spending, which they considered to be in violation of the First Amendment. They also dealt
overall of the actual independent expenditure?
Yeah, from a third party.
Or the amount of money that an entity could give to an independent expenditure?
The Supreme Court decision only dealt with the spending itself. They found that the federal requirement that required corporation and union spending to be done out of a separate segregated PAC was an unconstitutional restriction on the spending, and further that the spending was a problem. But since that decision, actually before it and after that, there have been a series of other court decisions that have dealt with the limits on contributions to such committees utilizing the Supreme Court's analysis.
So basically, it seems like the High Court actually spoke to the actual expenditure of the committee or committees on independent expenditures, but other courts now seem to be speaking to the contributions and or limits into an independent expenditure committee.
That's correct, and in part they're relying on some of the reasoning, although not specifically in that case, the reasoning about when the government can regulate in the campaign finance area, as it seems to have stepped back from when we were able to do that.
So it seems like the Supreme Court actually encouraged other other courts to be more willing to have a stronger say on what's constitutional or not when it comes to contributions into independent expenditures?
I think what the Supreme Court said and how it's been interpreted differently by different people, but certainly was a clue to at least the Ninth Circuit, the District of Columbia Circuit, that restrictions on independent expenditures in those committees are difficult other than disclosure and disclaimer requirements.
Okay, but disclosure and disclaimer, I would assume, is stronger today than it was yesterday as far as how we're going to deal with campaigning, contributions, limits or no limits, independent expenditures, et cetera. So basically, it seems like the courts are encouraging that moving in the direction of disclosure is not a constitutional problem.
Well, I have to say it seems that way, but of course they were
I'm
only
trying to be
dealing...
careful with my wording, too. I'm not a lawyer, but...
They were dealing with only the particular disclosure and disclaimer requirements they had in front of them.
Yeah.
Whether they would find every disclosure and disclaimer requirement permissible or permissible in all circumstances, probably that's not the case. I know that there's some consideration of some issues relating to certain types of ballot measures where persons are suggesting they have some privacy rights such that donors shouldn't be disclosed, and so there are probably some limits to what a government can do in terms of disclosure and disclaimer.
But a committee, for example, I'm going to kind of say this tongue-in-cheek, a not-for-profit organization gets an anonymous donation. If they want to honor the anonymity, that's their business. But when a campaign or a committee gets a donation and they want to remain anonymous, you have to go to the jurisdiction in which that donation was made into in order for somebody to say you can want to be anonymous or not, but you have to disclose because the requirement is to disclose. Right? I mean, it's not up to the donor to say, I don't want anybody to know that I made this. That say a person makes a $10,000 donation to an independent expenditure committee. Right now, at least in Los Angeles and California in general, that $10,000 contribution to that independent expenditure committee is going to show up somewhere in a disclosure process, correct? Correct. Even if the person who donated or the company that donated says, I want to remain anonymous, at least the way the rules are in California and in LA, Los Angeles campaigns, you're not allowed to remain anonymous, not with that example of a donation, correct?
That's correct.
That's generally true. I would say there's been a couple of organizations that have sought to challenge that in their particular circumstance.
But until they're successful in that challenge, they must disclose.
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for, I think, that clarity. Yes, thank you for that clarity. So with that, is there anybody else here to speak on item number 6 or item number 6? Seeing and hearing none.
Let me cast upon the room. There are 2 staffers in addition to our deputy city attorney and ethics commission.
Okay.
So I think we're done.
I think we're done. You trying to hurry me up? Okay. So the action of this committee to approve the city attorney recommendations and draft ordinance to repeal the city's ban on for-profit corporation and union direct campaign spending relative to LAMC section 49.7.26.2. That's the actions of this committee. Thank you very much. Anybody here for general public comment? Seeing and hearing none. General public is now closed. This committee is now adjourned. It's almost exactly